Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Dara Podcast. We're very excited to be having another episode with you guys, and we have an amazing guest with us here today as well. I'm your host, Maheen Qureshi. I'm a UX designer here at VentureDive. Ahmed, we're really happy to hear you to have you here with us. Please introduce yourself to our viewers.
Hi Maheen, my name is Ahmad. Everyone watching, I'm a US designer, researcher, and writer. A quick introduction of myself would be that I started my career as a writer within the B2B space specifically, and then I moved towards content writing. And it was at that point that I realized, okay, yeah, I'm good at what I do. I just don't really love it. I don't wake up every day thinking, yeah, what am I going to write today? That wasn't happening. So from there, I started doing some experimentations, came across UX, shifted to UX, and then I realized that within the field of UX, there is not a lot of emphasis on UX copy or copywriting or UX writing, to
Yeah.
be specific.
Yeah. So, guys, that brings us to the topic that we have for today. We will be talking about the importance of writing in UX design. I know that ये एक ऐसा टॉपिक है जो अक्सर हम लोग इतना इसको इम्पोर्टेंस देते नहीं है, but we know that it holds a lot of importance. इसकी exactly क्या ज़रूरत होती है, why is it so important for us, और क्या वो different types of writings हैं ताकि हम लोग differentiate कर सकें कि UX writing exactly होता क्या है, what is the correct way of writing in UX and what is the incorrect way. So we want to be covering all of that. And Ahmed just happens to be a very good a specialist in this particular category. So Ahmed, the floor is yours. Please, let's go over the agenda that we have for today.
Yeah. So I'm going to quickly walk you guys through what I have planned for you. We're going to start off by discussing what writing is in of itself. Then we're going to briefly go into its types, all the because in the Pakistani industry, the words content writing, copywriting, UX writing, ये सारे एक ही खेत की मिली समझ जाते हैं. If I'm to be honest, the idea is to sort of debunk some of those mysteries कि वो क्या चीजें हैं and how do they work, and then we'll move on to the introduction for UX writing. And then finally, some of the mistakes that we as designers make in UX writing and how we can fix them as well. So that's the overall agenda. Yeah. So let's start off with what writing is in of itself. Writing, think of it this way: you're a being and you have thoughts inside your mind. Writing is simply an expression of those thoughts. How you choose to express what's in your mind is basically what writing is, in a very toned down definition, of course. Not to mention it also helps organize your thoughts. So not only is it an expression, but it's also an organization of it. So it's like a mix of both. I won't go into too much detail about how the whole process works. I think we can do a session on that some other day. But yeah, I mean, that's a quick introduction to what writing is. And it's off.
So, you know how people often say that the first idea is often not the best one, and that is why it is so important for us to write down actually all of our ideas on paper. Could you say a comment on that as well, on why it's so important for us to write down everything that's in our mind? Also goes on with what you've written on about decluttering your mind by writing stuff down.
I think I'd like to quote one of the most inspirational people that I've heard, Jordan Peterson, and he said, "Write badly. Even if you can't write good, write badly." And that's the case with a lot of us. शुरू में हमें लगता है कि यार but the writing isn't really that good. मुझे भी अक्सर लगता है ऐसे. तो ऐसा नहीं कि वो चीज़ खराब हो जाती है, that stays. But उसका ये है कि once you start writing badly, and let's suppose you've written like 100 words, like really bad 100 words, you can cut them off, let's say 60. Maybe 60 were bad, so the remaining 40 would be somewhat good. तो ऐसा नहीं है कि जो भी आप लिखो सारा A to Z ही गलत हो. उसकी the probability of that happening is very low. You have to start somewhere, and writing good or aiming to write good does not help. So you should aim to just write, because when you think about कि मैंने अच्छा लिखना है तो फिर you start to put too much focus into it, too much attention into it. और फिर जब आप वो उसको जो चीज़ लिखी हुई है उनकी वर्डिंग को ठीक करने लग जाते हो तो फिर द होल आइडिया ऑफ द थॉट बीइंग एक्सप्रेस्ड वो चीज़ मिनिमाइज हो जाती है. तो इन ऑर्डर टू मेक श्योर कि योर एक्सप्रेशन इज मैक्सिमाइज्ड, जस्ट राइट बैडली एंड यू कैन ऑलवेज क्लीन इट अप लेटर. सो That's the general idea behind it. I hope that answers your question first.
Yes, yes. It does answer my question. And now I think what our viewers would really like to know is if you could differentiate on the different types of writing. So UX writing, we know that it is some sort of writing, right? But there are other sorts of writings as well. So people might have a different skill entirely, and they might not even know it. So could you just like help us understand कि वो कौन सी डिफरेंट टाइप्स ऑफ राइटिंग है और मतलब आप कौन सी ग्रुप में एग्जैक्टली फिट इन करते हो उस चीज में?
So that's actually the next topic that I have planned right now as well. It's important to understand that not every writer can write everything. So there are niches, there are different fields even within writing itself. One of a pretty good example that's coming to my mind right now is that a novelist might not be a good report writer. So, and when we talk about the industry in Pakistan, specifically, हम तीन नाम बहुत बार बार सुनते हैं. First one is content writing, second one is copywriting, and then third one, जो अभी recently it's starting to gain some momentum, which is UX writing. UX writing I'll come at the end, starting with थोड़ा सा मैं जो ज़्यादा commonly used terms हैं इस तरह content writing उनको डिस्कस कर लेता हूँ to show कि वो क्या चीज़ UX writing नहीं है. So content writing जो लोग करते हैं या जिन लोगों का उनसे वास्ता पड़ा हुआ है, so they would know that this is more towards long form content, यानी आप blogs हो गए, articles हो गए, और इसका जो core objective होता है ना content writing का, वो ये होता है कि आपने leads drive करनी है, sales करनी है और इस तरह की different activities करनी है. So it's a very very B2B focused task or a very salesy task, if I were to be more specific. Copywriting is a bit different. Copywriting का objective leads generate करना नहीं होता. Its objective is to sell something. और ये बहुत closely match करता है UX writing से, but this is from a business or marketing point of view. So its aim is to sell something by making it easy, but from a marketing or a business standpoint. UX writing, however, and again, this is an example of how copywriting is done, where the idea is to sell Rolls-Royce by outlining the problem that users face in it. UX writing is slightly different. Very similar to copywriting, but its objective from a user standpoint होता है. आपके user के लिए कोई चीज़ आप किस तरह से आसान बना सकते हो. This can be websites, web apps, even physical products जो आपके अक्सर phones पे, gadgets पे, different चीज़ों पे लिखे होते हैं, that could also potentially be in UX writing as well. And if its objective is to make it understandable for the user. अगर इसमें बहुत आसान लफ्ज़ों में differentiate करूँ तो it would be कि copywriting is for the business and UX writing is for the user.
Yeah.
इन तीनों में एक core objective का difference आ रहा है. तो अक्सर how you write them इसका भी difference आता है. I don't know when I was a content writer, तो उसमें we would go the extra mile to explain something. So अगर I could talk about something in paragraphs and paragraphs. So people would actually read that. But again, in UX writing, if I write a paragraph on anything, so the first thing that's going to happen is I'm most probably going to get fired.
Right. I want to ask you something, and I'm sorry to interrupt, but I have a question. So, you said that you started off with content writing, and I think that's where if you have any interest in writing, then at some point in your life you might have done content writing, like blogs and all of these kind of things. You might have tried them out at some point. But do you think it has some sort of an effect on how good of a writer you are as a UX writer? Like, do you think that you can be a good UX writer if you are a very good content writer, or vice versa?
No, not at all. As a content writer, it's much more difficult because, see, if somebody's starting from scratch, they can build their UX writing skills very easily. But if somebody's coming from a content side or purely content writing side, it's very difficult for them to change their styles because they're not building their styles. They're changing them. It's like they're starting from the negative, and that's usually difficult. इसीलिए you would never really see too many content writers turning into UX designers. But it is a very fruitful effort. Then you can have a plethora of multiple skills in your... क्योंकि देखो, जब content writing से आते हो तो बहुत सारी चीज़ें आपके completely reverse होती हैं UX writing. एग्जाम्पल दूँ तो मतलब I believe I do have some examples later on in the slides as well. पर जिस तरह हम यहाँ पे बात करें अब as a content writer, my job would be to explain something in a very lengthy detail. और जहाँ पे complex software आ जाते हैं, although Slack isn't really that complex of a software, but जहाँ पे pure very SaaS based और complex software आते हैं, वहाँ पे फिर यू हैव टू मेक श्योर कि आप उस चीज़ को ओवर एक्सप्लेन ना करो, आप उस चीज़ को ओवर कॉम्प्लिकेटेड ना करो. सो वन ऑफ द प्रिंसिपल्स ऑफ यूएक्स राइटिंग इज टू यूज एक्टिव वॉइस एज मच एज पॉसिबल. This is something that we don't particularly follow in content writing. Maybe the beginners do, but once you start progressing in the field, you start using more complex words, more complex sentences. Not too complex, but just a tad bit. And in US writing, it's the exact reverse. So उस चीज़ को cater करने के लिए कि you have to understand that यार ये skill set मैंने unlearn करके दोबारा से learn कर, तो that's difficult. But again, it's a very fruitful effort.
Right. I understand कि content writing में भी try to focus more on कि आप कितना content डाल रहे हैं. The more the better, right? UX writing में भी try to keep it as concise as possible. लेकिन हम एक ऐसी direction में move कर रहे हैं जहाँ पर बहुत ज़्यादा टेक्स्ट लाइक आई सेड कि बहुत ज़्यादा टेक्स्ट जो है हमें नहीं दिखाना है, बट एट द सेम टाइम हमारे जो व्यूअर्स हैं they're looking for like visual aids, they're looking for text, they're looking for some sort of direction, right? तो where's the fine line? हमें किस तरह से पता है कि हमें एग्जैक्टली कितना कंटेंट अपने व्यूअर्स को दिखाना है, कितनी यूएक्स राइटिंग जो है हमें करनी चाहिए हर चीज के लिए?
To be honest, I wish I had an answer, but there's no rule of thumb that I think that you should write this many words and you should write that many words. It usually depends on a case-to-case basis. Sometimes having no content is the best strategy, but at the same time, having paragraphs worth of it is a good strategy. It depends on context क्या है, आप अपने यूजर को क्या चीज़ communicate करना चाह रहे हो. Usually, this is a trend, might not necessarily be true in all the cases, but in some of the cases जहाँ पे the objective is to convey information, वहाँ पे it should be content heavy, but जहाँ पे the objective is कि user कोई task perform करे, वहाँ पे usually the copy or the UX copy is kept to a bare minimum. Again, this is not a general rule of thumb. This is something that I've observed. It's too early to tell if this is an actual phenomenon. For that, I'll have to experience it more for a couple of years, and then I'll be able to say, yeah, this is something. So it's a bit of a...
Right. Could you give our viewers more examples on what exactly UX writing is?
Yeah, so I actually have a few examples later on in the slides. I will get to them right now. But before we jump into that, I just want to help users visualize the content in of itself उसकी ज़रूरत क्यों होती है. Because when we say the word design, when we say the word UX design, so usually visual elements come into mind. Content isn't really something that first appears in the mind. But it's important to understand that digital communication is all content, or at least 95% of it, according to the lines of Ahmad, which he's a pretty good designer and a writer. I follow him on and off. Content has that effect that it's very easy for people to understand. I mean, there's this really cool trick. You can never look at a word without reading it. Don't try it out. Look at any word and try not reading it. It's not possible. That's an effect that where content plays. But you can ignore design. So design can be ignored, content cannot. Yeah, so we were discussing that content in itself is not something that you can ignore, at least not consciously. So subconsciously. If you do काफी focus करके आप जानबूझ के ignore करते हो तो वो एक अलग मसला है. But subconsciously we can't ignore content. That's why it's the best tool for digital communication. So now we'll get to the fun bit, which is the intro to UX writing. इसमें I'll also explain some of the basic fundamentals, और इसमें we'll also go into a few examples as well. कुछ examples मैंने as a precursor रखी थी कि what UX writing is. लेकिन मुझे मैं पहले बात की थी कि the idea is to make something understandable for the user. उसमें you don't have to write in too many words. So the length of your content is not relevant at all. उस चीज़ से कोई खास फर्क नहीं पड़ता कि आपने कितना डिटेल लिखा है. I know from an SEO standpoint, length की requirement होती है, but from a user standpoint, lengthy content or lengthy stuff is pretty low. Nobody reads lengthy stuff. मैं writer हूँ, अब खुद नहीं पढ़ता. किसी और क्या करना cancel that. This is the same example for Slack that we discussed before. यहाँ पे there is this really cool activity that I do with people when I'm discussing UX writing is this is Google. Everybody's used Google hundreds of millions of times. Can you identify the copy of uh, any copy apart from the search? And I'm feeling lucky that
Maybe there is a language selector somewhere. No idea what the bottom ones are in the black one. But honestly, the ones that I remember the most are I'm feeling lucky and search. Even though, I think we both have never used I'm feeling lucky.
nobody has. So this is what it actually looks like. And there's an interesting phenomenon here that you, as a user, remember the button or remember the copy that you've most used, and you remember the copy that most intrigued you, but everything else was just background noise. So that's something that I've noticed in UX writing a lot. The users usually remember what they use the most or what they think is the most interesting. Anything that doesn't fall into these categories, that's just like a really cool tip that I've learned over the years.
Right, it's interesting.
So, if we talk about some of the principles that UX writing follows, the first one is being as clear as possible. The first tip that I talked about earlier as well, using active voice. Active voice helps. If you can, like अगर ऑप्शन है तो always use active voice unless or until के वो बहुत ही it's a very rare case and you have to use something else, that's a separate case scenario. उसके बाद use present tense. Past tense and future tense I usually avoid. It's very difficult for somebody to relate. Sounds like a weird thing to say, but it's true. Usually past tense and future tense are both related to what's not currently happening because of the underlying principle. It's difficult for the user to relate कैसे यार ये चीज हो रही है, ये चीज नहीं हुई है, ये चीज अगर होनी है तो जब होएगी तब देखी जाएगी. That usually has a factor into it. And use the U view. If you Google the U view, probably might not find anything to do benefits of an but the idea is pretty simple. Try to revolve the conversation around words like you, the first person to be specific. आप जिस तरह से आप बात करते हो, अगर मैं आपसे बात कर रहा हूँ तो I will use the word you. Maheen, you are doing that, doing this, whatever, right? So use that conversational tone. That really helps. It helps build that connection. Yeah. So this is an example of what not to do. This is very passive. This is a very passive statement. It's not active voice. It's not present tense. It's very bland, and not to mention it has a lot of extra words as well. So here's something that much more simpler version of it. There's actually a version even simpler than this one that WhatsApp introduced a few years ago, and now everybody's doing it, which is like the double tick thing, the blue one. So that's a very interesting concept that they've eliminated the need for content. But a pretty good move by them. The second thing is to be concise. This is very closely related to the first one. Be clear, but be concise as well. जो आपका objective है, आपने वो mention करना है, उसके अलावा जो भी extra words हैं उनको avoid करो. Extra words could be anything. It could be a has been, would have been, should, shall. इस सारे जो words होते हैं, they usually complicate a sentence for no reason at all. And second one, avoid the blocks of text. If your design has a block of text, you have not done a good job. Because nobody reads blocks of text. 3 lines, maybe 4. 4 is like pushing it, but if it's a bit beyond 4, you're definitely in the red. And concise, but in a way that you're talking the user's language. आप user की जुबान में उससे बात कर रहे हो. अब उसमें something that's concise मेरी जुबान में might not be user की जुबान में. तो उसी तरह एक फैक्टर आता है कि उसकी लैंग्वेज में आप कितने कंसाइज रह सकते हो. अगर ये सारी चीज़ें प्रैक्टिस ही आती हैं, देयर इज नो रियल वे ये काम कर लोगे तो आपकी लाइफ आसान हो जाएगी. You become the greatest UX writer of all mankind. There is no formula for that. It's just practice. So here's another example of what not to do. Like this is a lot of extra words. There's a lot of clutter. It's not concise at all. Here's a more user-friendly approach. You've alerted them there's a problem. You've alerted them what the problem is, and then you provide them with what they can do to overcome that problem. Again, this might not be the only solution. There could be multiple solutions more. So the third most important tip in UX writing that I want to discuss was be useful. यहाँ पे वो चीज़ आती है कि अक्सर there's this thing कि I don't see the content किधर है इस डिजाइन में, वो जो एक कंसर्न होती है ना, that applies here कि जहाँ पे जरूरत है वहाँ पे ऐड करो, जहाँ पे जरूरत नहीं है वहाँ पे ऐड करने की जरूरत नहीं।
Right.
और अगर मैं थोड़ा सा मोर स्पेसिफिक बात करूँ तो जहाँ पे कोई मीनिंगफुल एक्शन परफॉर्म करना है यूजर ने, वहाँ पे आप यू कैन गिव देम द कंटेंट दे नीड, या जहाँ पे उन्हें इंफॉर्मेशन चाहिए यू कैन गिव इट टू देम, और जहाँ पे वो दोनों रिक्वायरमेंट्स नहीं है देयर इज नो रियल नीड टू ऐड अननेसेसरी कंटेंट। आई रिमेंबर आई वाज वर्किंग विद दिस क्लाइंट एंड he loved content. Like he loved content. So what he would do is he would just send me blocks of text और कहता था कि इसको ना बस आप कहीं पर एडजस्ट कर, and I'm like I don't want to do that. I really don't want to do that. But खैर that was some dark times.
Yeah,
उसको
I
बड़ी
think
मुश्किल से है.
yeah, I think we often face certain clients who really want to. They think that by giving users a lot of content, हम उनकी help कर रहे हैं, और उनके लिए experience को बेहतर कर रहे हैं. लेकिन in reality, I think कि काफी experience से hinder हो जाता है जब हम इतना ज़्यादा content उन्हें दिखा रहे हैं, because people don't. The reality is that people just don't have time. And but let's talk about call to action buttons as well, since we were talking about directing towards meaningful actions. Call to action buttons, maybe there are like different ways that you can write a call to action button, right? It could be like a straightforward one word button. It could be like a link button that has like a short sentence or something. तो इसमें कोई मतलब guidelines है कि exactly which one is better than the other? एक button में हमें कितना formal होना चाहिए? Should we be informal? Should we try using slang? Or is that something कि मतलब वो बस आपकी ब्रांड की पर्सनालिटी पे डिपेंड करता है कि आपको कौन सी टोन जो है उसके साथ जाना है?
So there are a few guidelines. Again, they're not hard and fast rules. UX में तो like there's this joke that everything depends on the context. The same thing applies. It depends on that context है क्या. But normally होता ये है कि using words like again I don't care if you ask the question. I actually have an example of this later on in the slides as well. I'll show that when we get to that. But just to briefly answer your question, if I'm asked a question, are you sure you want to read this, and I have the CTS yes and no. There's nothing wrong with that. So I won't say that that's a wrong approach, but that can be improved. Usually, your main CTA should have a verb in it. Okay, the specific action that you want them to perform. If you want them to remove, so it will be something like remove. Or if you want them to keep, it will be like something to keep. And that really helps. कि फिर यूजर को सोचना नहीं पड़ता कि यस का क्या मतलब है, नो का मतलब है. ये चीज है. दूसरा, योर CTS should probably not have more than 2, 3, maybe 4 words. 4 is like pushing it, so it's like the maximum limit, but not more than that. I remember this was my design देख रहा था, उसमें the CTA was almost a full sentence. It was ugly.
Okay.
It was extremely ugly.
I've seen some of those myself, yes, I would like to save my progress, or yes, I want to go back where I started. I mean, they're like proper long sentences.
Yeah, that is not a good strategy.
Yeah.
वहाँ पे यूजर को कॉन्शियसली एफर्ट पुट करके उसको पढ़ना पड़ता है, तो nobody wants to do that. हम स्कूलों में नहीं पढ़ते थे, तो यहाँ पे क्या इफेक्ट पड़ेगा. I don't know about you, but I was never a good student. Yeah, now we're going to talk about the really fun part and the crux of this entire podcast, which is all the mistakes that we as designers specifically make when we are writing. Because UX design, is what, especially in the Pakistani industry, multiple backgrounds load out there. So you have people from the CS, you have people from some people that are actually from a design background, and then you have people like me who have no idea what's going on. I come from a completely different neighborhood. I'm from a marketing background, so it's like a completely different industry. तो उन individuals के लिए कौन सी mistakes हैं जो UX writing में avoid कर सकते हैं? That's what we'll discuss. The first one, and this is the one that I used to make a lot. This was my biggest problem, which is sounding like a robot. Especially आप आते हो किसी content writing वाले background से UX में शिफ्ट करते हो, तो in order to be concise, you start sounding like a robot. तो उस चीज़ को you need to make sure कि आपके डिज़ाइन में there's an element of personality and there's an element of charm in it. अब यहाँ पे जिस तरह I've added two different examples. Uh, if I would ask you, Maheen, even the viewers out there, which one do you guys think is the better copy here? Again, this is not a LinkedIn post which you guys better.
Yeah, no, I think that the second one actually is probably the one that I would prefer because an authentication error has occurred. It might not even be very clear to some people. And it's also very alarming for no reason.
Yeah. It has that FBI आ जाएगी आपके घर में.
Yeah, it's very scary.
So yeah, and not to mention कि the actual problem है उसको highlight नहीं कर रहा. It just says failure authentication error. So it's important कि आप जो actual error है उसको identify करो इस तरीके से कि आप user को बता भी रहे हो and then giving them a solution to it as well. So it's like two sides of the coin. There are sides equally. You say exactly right. The second one is the better copy. And yeah, one thing that I will add real quick before jumping on to the next one is that these three social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, although I don't actually stop using all three of them. I never use TikTok, I only use Facebook and Insta. But as far as I remember, which was a few months back, all three of them have this really strong personality. So if we talk about Facebook, Facebook is a boomer social media now, right? Facebook is also one of the most feature-rich social media platforms. So it has like games, it has posts, it has videos, it has like a bunch of stuff. So you would expect people of an older age to not become comfortable with that, but that the exact opposite is the truth. They've grown to become comfortable with that. उसकी वजह भी है कि जो उन्होंने अपनी personality रखी हुई है through their copy, it's very easy for them. It's very engaging for older audiences. Similarly, Instagram is like the millennial social media, if I were to be so bold. Again, I'm not saying that Instagram is only used by millennials. Obviously, that's not the case. It's used by a whole wide range of audiences, but the ones more comfortable with it, or the ones that would prefer it over Facebook, would either lie within the millennial stage or maybe Gen Z. And the last one, TikTok. Again, TikTok is something that would not make sense to a millennial. In Instagram, they might try. TikTok, they won't even try.
Yeah, agreed.
On average. I myself won't try it either. Not sure if I'm a boomer on the inside or not. Yeah.
All right.
So yeah, again, no hate on TikTok. It's a great company. From a marketing standpoint, it's one of the best tools.
Yeah.
But I'm not in marketing anymore. Yeah. The second problem is talking in a lot of riddles. The first problem had to do with being complex. And the second one is, in a way, a reverse of that. तो आप फोकस करते हो ना कि आपने कम लिखना है, तो फिर आप या तो उसको बहुत कॉम्प्लिकेटेड कर देते हो, जो कि हमारी फर्स्ट प्रॉब्लम थी. जो आप उस प्रॉब्लम से निकलते हो तो इमीडिएटली जो सेकंड प्रॉब्लम आती है वो आप ये है कि उसको थोड़ा एक्सप्लेन करने के चक्कर में उसको बात तुम्हें घुमाना शुरू कर देते हो. I'm pretty sure that all of us would remember the good old game Minesweeper.
Vividly. I remember not being able to play it, but I remember it.
That's it was a pretty easy game. I mean, all you had to do is like the first click was a guess. But उसके बाद जो numbers होते थे, they were indication कि इसके surrounding में कितने bombs हैं.
Okay.
it was a fun game. It's like a mind game, but it was fun.
I
But
remember
anyway,
though, yeah. But however, I do remember this message that I used to get back when I used to play games on my PC. Um, it feels like it's a test. Like this is part of the game. Choose the best answer, and you're going to be rewarded. But you know, I was a kid. I had most of the times I was in a hurry because my mom wanted me to switch off the PC and start doing my homework. So मैं कोई भी मतलब I would literally select any one of them. कि जल्दी से I just want to be done with it. But yeah, please explain why this is an incorrect way of giving options to your users.
yeah. So यहाँ पे we've given them three options. All three of those options have the word exit in it. Two of them start with exit, one of them ends with exit. To, to be honest, third, to me, why is that even an option? But let's go with the flow here. अब यहाँ पे there's the option and then there's there's subtext to it. It's a lot of content and it doesn't really say anything. There's a first or second point more. You have the word exit, you have the word and you have the word save. Again, which मैंने पहले कही थी कि users don't read, they skim through it. तो मैं skim through करूँगा ना, I'm going to read the first option and the second option is exactly the same. वो जो don't है उसको मुझे process करने में time लगेगा. तो उस चीज को cater करने के लिए this was one of the starting pop-ups. तो बाद में उन्होंने इसको ठीक कर दिया था, thank God. And this is what they made it into. अब एक तो उन्होंने वो जो helper text है वो remove किया, which was a good addition, और जो third option थी उसको remove किया. Although I still think it can be improved because
there are still some redundancy in this type of copy. Like I think we can still not say exit in every option that we're giving over here.
this is actually fun. This wasn't officially part of the slides, but there's actually a really big UX flaw here.
Yeah.
Can you point it out in this entire pop-up? I'll give the viewers a few minutes. There's like a major flaw.
Please enlighten me.
Okay, so Minesweeper, it's a hyper casual game.
Okay.
You don't save hyper casual games. There's no need to save a hyper casual. This entire pop-up itself is redundant.
Yeah. Why would you want to save Minesweeper?
Yeah, so ऐसा नहीं होता कि आपने रात को 10 घंटे लगा के Minesweeper खेलेंगे, एक सेव उठाया, मैं सुबह कंटिन्यू करूँगा. Nobody does that. There's no benefit to that. So अच्छी बात है कि हम सिर्फ इसलिए कि ये चीज इस तरह से होती है कि भाई इस चीज के बाद ये इसमें आती है हमेशा, तो हम उस चीज को फ्लो में ऐड कर देते हैं. But that shouldn't be the case. अगर किसी चीज की जरूरत नहीं है, don't add it. So yeah, this is something that I just noticed myself as well.
Very interesting. Good point as well.
Yeah. So इसमें एक और point that I really make a lot with during my mentor sessions and whenever I'm giving a talk on UX writing is that as a designer, I've done my background research, I've done my due diligence, मैं अपना homework करके आया हूँ. जो business है, they know their stuff. So we're somewhat of an expert in the field, just field में, ठीक है. But the user होता है, नहीं होता. He or she is not the expert. All they care about is कि क्या उनका task पूरा हो रहा है या नहीं. So your copy needs to be aligned with that. Again, मैं word copy use कर रहा हूँ, but the more accurate term would be words. So your words in themselves need to be aligned. The users are not an expert. उस चीज को digestible हो, तो user easily उसको process कर सके, उसको हजम कर सके basically. That's a very core foundation of UX writing. And then this leads me to my last problem. Again, the list of problems is not exhaustive. So, you could have hundreds more. These are some that I've noticed are some of the top ones that I've faced and some the people around me have faced. And this is again linked to the second one. अब होता ये है कि जब आपने स्टार्टिंग में उसको शॉर्ट करने के चक्कर में कॉम्प्लिकेट कर दिया, फिर उसको पर्सनालिटी देने के चक्कर में उसको बहुत ज़्यादा एक्सपैंड कर दिया, तो फिर उसके बाद देयर इज अ मिडिल प्रॉब्लम एज वेल कि आप सिंपल तो करते हो, पर्सनालिटी भी देते हो, बट आप एक्सेस वर्ड्स ऐड कर देते हो. आप यू नॉट सेइंग कंसाइसली और प्रिसाइसली कि आप कहना क्या चाह रहे हो. आप वो एग्जैक्ट बात नहीं करते जो आप कहना चाह रहे हो. सर यहाँ पे I've added two post messages that your password has been successfully saved, and your new password saved. Which one do you think is would be the better copy for an average user?
I think new password saved is pretty straightforward. I mean, I know that it's successfully saved. It can't be unsuccessfully saved.
Yeah, exactly. Because you got unsuccessfully saved everything. So that's exactly right. The second one is the more optimal approach. So UX में something that I usually do is, although slightly थोड़ा सा conflict आएगा, कि I don't like to say कि यार ये चीज़ completely गलत है. Even the first one, there could be a scenario कि इस क्रिएट कर दो. So it always depends on the context कि आप किसके लिए बना रहे हैं और क्यों बना रहे हैं. इस तरह I know one group of audience that loves lengthy content. उनको हर चीज़ में lengthy content चाहिए होता है, which is academic researchers. Those guys love lengthy content. They strive for it. And so here's another example. यहाँ पे वही the question that you asked about the CTS, लोगों ने यहाँ पे उसको cater किया हुआ. अब होता ये है कि जब हम कोई भी पॉपअप डिजाइन कर रहे होते हैं तो हमारे माइंड में हमें कॉन्फर्मेशन लेते हैं. कॉन्फर्मेशन इस तरह से लेनी है कि हमें उस चीज़ को रिकॉल भी करवाना है. I'm sure most of you guys would already be familiar with Nelson's usability heuristics, the 10 Nelson's usability heuristics.
Yes.
So one of them is it's something like recognition rather than recall. Or am I saying it in reverse? Recall? No, it's recognition, right? Am I saying it right?
Yeah, I think you are.
So recognition rather than recall. अब उसमें पिछली स्क्रीन से यूजर आ रहा है and you asked a confirmation whatever. So you should give them something to recognize instead कि वो पिछली स्क्रीन को recall करें. So based on that, I'll again say कि which one would you say is the optimal approach here? Recognize करवाना है, not recall.
I think I would go probably with the second one.
Because the first one doesn't really tell us anything. So
Exactly.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
Am I sure about it? I'm not sure about anything.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
it's like, that's definitely a factor. One of the things that I've done here is that instead of having just delete location, I've added a small helper text as well. This is something जब आप किसी ऐसे audience के साथ, किसी ऐसे user के साथ, किसी ऐसे user के लिए experience build कर रहे हो तो बहुत ज़्यादा accustomed है to specific terms like yes, no, okay, done, terms like this. तो फिर आप done से उन terms को equation से बाहर नहीं निकालते. It's like a step-by-step process. पहले उस टर्म को थोड़ा एक्सप्लेन करते हो और फिर ग्रेजुअली उसमें से इनिशियल टर्म निकालते हो. This is something that I do because gradually remove करते हैं. It's something जो कि product strategy में it's used a lot. कि वो कभी भी complete revamp बहुत rare होता है कि so step-by-step gradually process में implement करते हैं. Yeah, so that's pretty much all from my side. This was most of what I've learned over the years in UX writing. क्या होती है, किस तरह होती है, इसमें क्या गलतियाँ हम करते हैं और more importantly क्या गलतियाँ ठीक किस तरह से करना.
Right.
Yeah.
Awesome. So guys, everything that we talked about today, what Ahmed actually talked about today was, first of all, we spoke about an introduction to writing itself, what writing actually is, उसकी क्या importance है हमारी daily life में, हमारी professional life में, what are the different types of writing? We covered that as well. However, अगर अभी भी हमारे viewers को कोई confusion है, and if you want to know more about any particular kind of writing, then please don't be afraid to just comment below. Just ask any questions you want from Ahmed as well. I know कि Ahmed को बहुत अच्छा लगता है जब उससे लोग difficult questions पूछते हैं. So please don't be afraid to leave questions in the comments, and we'll be more than happy to answer. We also spoke about what matters in UX design and the different kinds of mistakes, the do's and don'ts of UX writing itself. So again, I think ये एक बहुत interesting, insightful podcast था, and I hope that our viewers feel the same way. I know that I also learned a lot from this session today, and hopefully this clears out a lot of the confusions around the topic itself. Thank you so much, Ahmed, for being a part of the Dara podcast. And we hope we'll have another session with you someday on another topic. And until then, thank you everyone for watching, and see you in the next episode. Please like this video, and please again comment on anything that you want. If you want us to work on some sort of a particular topic in our next podcast, please do write that in the comment below. Please share this video wherever you want, and subscribe to our channel. Thank you. Allah Hafiz.